Let's talk about the Constitution. Before we start, I'd like to make the request that you watch the video all the way through and listen very carefully before commenting. This is one of those kinds of conversations where people tend to listen to a few seconds, jump to a conclusion, and start making accusations that are completely off base. So please, take a deep breath and get ready to question some things that you aren't used to questioning. In our previous video, we asked you to consider how you would face a post-collapse America. One where there were multiple factions who each had their own ideas of how to live. And I asked you how you would deal with rebuilding in the face of those radically incompatible ideologies. Those who want socialism, those who want a resource-based economy, those who want to restore the Constitution, those who want anarcho-capitalism. Now what I put forth is that you have three options for dealing with this situation. One, you try to convert everyone else to your plan. Two, you use violence to force everyone into your plan. Or three, you allow people to choose their own plan and you choose your own. The third option is based on a non-aggression principle. In reality, these same three options face us right now in every single society on this planet. But people don't acknowledge that. People think that somehow the government and some pieces of paper give the government the right to use force to compel compliance. Our current paradigm is based on a combination of options 1 and 2. Essentially, we try to convince everyone that our way is right, but if all else fails, we stick a gun in their face. Of course, you, the peaceful, law-abiding citizen that you are, would never do that. You would never stick a gun in someone's face. I'm sure you're above that. So instead, you hire someone else to do it for you. Law enforcement. No one likes to look at it like that because it's less than flattering. But that's what it is. Society hired a middleman to enforce their violence for them. Unfortunately, you no longer control that middleman because he's realized that he can do whatever he wants. After all, the government has the monopoly on violence. What are you going to do? Now, a lot of people balked at option number 3. And many people attacked the non-aggression principle with arguments that clearly demonstrated that they didn't understand it at all. First of all, the non-aggression principle is not pacifism. The non-aggression principle simply states that you do not attack someone who is not being violent. It does not call for you to refrain from defending yourself, your family, or someone else who's being attacked. To the contrary, a fierce response with overwhelming force is the best way to ensure that the non-aggression principle is respected in the future if someone decides to cross that line. Now, some people tried to call the non-aggression principle utopian, claiming that this isn't how the world works. This is just asinine. I'm sorry, but you guys need to think a little bit more before you just start making comments like this. The non-aggression principle already is the standard that we hold to in our day-to-day social interactions. When you hang out with your friends, when you go to the store, when you mingle in a crowd, you live by the non-aggression principle. If you don't, then you probably get in a lot of fights. If you were in a line of people waiting for tickets at a movie theater, for example, we all understand that it's inappropriate to start pushing or punching people to get them to give us their place in line. And by the same token, you understand that if someone does come up to you and start pushing you or punching you, you have the right to defend yourself. There's nothing utopian about it. It's just common sense. It's just common decency. For some reason, people have this absurd notion that these principles are nullified if the person using violence and intimidation is wearing a badge or a special uniform. To be perfectly blunt about this, you guys who believe that a badge or a uniform somehow nullifies basic morality are the ones with magical thinking. The non-aggression principle just calls that magical thinking into account. Now, not surprisingly, some of the strongest resistance to the concept of the non-aggression principle came from the constitutionalists. Now, this is where we get into some delicate territory and where you really need to listen carefully. If you've watched any number of my videos, I'm sure you've heard me addressing the police and military in regards to their oath, asking them to remember their oath to defend the Constitution. And I fully intend to make other videos in the future calling for the same thing. Now, those who look at the logical implications of the non-aggression principle might be wondering how these two ideas can be reconciled. And I've had people ask me that very question multiple times. So I'll address that here. What it comes down to is this. The Constitution is the last point of reference that we have in our attempt to convince the police and the military to respect our rights. They took an oath to defend the Constitution, and the Constitution is being violated. They aren't upholding the Constitution, and as a result, the United States has become a full-fledged police-state dictatorship involved in dozens of undeclared wars and covert operations across the globe. Asking them to uphold that oath is something of a minimum request. They already promised to do it, and they haven't. Moreover, they have complied with these orders, which is what made these infringements possible. When I ask the police and military to respect their oath, it's because I know that it will take a miracle to get them to do even that. And there's virtually no chance of getting them to look any deeper if they aren't even willing to keep the commitments that they already made. America is headed for a collapse. We have a corrupt government that wants absolute power, and we have a population that is willfully ignorant and distracted by entertainment and consumerism, with a police and military that are not honoring their oaths. In this context, the absolute best we could hope for is to have the police and military resist orders to crush dissidents and to disarm the citizens as the system is collapsing. As such, I consider the Oath Keepers, those who are committed to making a stand, to be the last guardians. Their job is to keep what is left of constitutional boundaries in place as the US government falls. However, after it falls and the dust settles, and the dust will take years to settle, do those who believe in the Constitution believe that they have the right to go and invade the scores of communities who have survived in their own way? What happens if those communities meet you at the gate and say, no, we're not interested in that Constitution anymore? We wrote our own Constitution. We all signed it. What are you going to do then? Are you going to try to force them to submit? Are you going to declare war on them and kill them if they try to defend themselves? Don't sugarcoat this. Don't just say defending the Constitution when what you're really talking about is killing people who don't want to go along with what you want to do. Say what you mean what you say. There are going to be a lot of people who aren't going to accept you forcing that document down their throat. And you're going to have to choose whether you use violence to get your way. Now, for those of you who think that what I'm proposing here is some kind of radical anti-American ideology, consider for a moment that Thomas Jefferson himself stated that every generation should rewrite the Constitution, because he considered it illegitimate to have men that aren't even alive dictate how the next generation is going to live. But let's take it a step deeper. Say I write my own Constitution on a piece of paper and I get my friends to sign it. And this new Constitution dictates a system of government and taxation, law enforcement. Do I have the right to force you to abide by it? Why not? I'll tell you why. Because a contract isn't valid unless all parties implicated are fully informed as to the terms of the contract and sign that contract voluntarily. No group of us can just arbitrarily get together, write a contract, and impose it on people who didn't sign it. So what makes this Constitution any different? This piece of paper written 200 years ago by a group of aristocrats that claimed to establish a government with the right to take property by force via taxation from any person who will ever live in the landmass of the United States in perpetuity, and to establish a Congress comprised of people that weren't even born yet, to make laws dictating the behavior of people who weren't even born yet, even though none of the people who are going to be ruled over in this manner had a chance to look at the terms of the contract and decide one way or the other. I'll tell you what this is. It's collectivism. It's the social contract. It's the same thing that conservatives are always accusing the liberals of. The reality of the matter is both liberals and conservatives are collectivists that use force to get what they want. The entire idea that you can use violence on people today because someone 200 years ago said that you could is an absurdity. Okay, so let's take a step back. You want a constitution-based system. Great. Write that constitution. Do it now. Write that constitution and start finding people who are willing to sign it. Those who do sign it have agreed to its terms, and by that logic, they should be bound to those terms. But those who choose a different constitution cannot be bound by yours if they didn't sign yours, any more than the American people can be forced to abide by the French Constitution. It is of utmost importance that you come to terms with this right now, because if you don't, you'll have to learn it through war, and you might not win that war. What it comes down to is don't pick a fight with people who don't want to fight. That's the non-aggression principle. It's as simple as that. Now, I know I just got through saying some things that are going to set some people off. Once again, I'd like to request that you sit with this for a moment and think about it before you comment. If you're going to respond, use logic, address the specific arguments, and counter them rationally. Don't just throw out catchphrases or one-liners. Don't get emotional. Don't just repeat something that someone else told you. Step outside of your habits for just a few minutes and allow yourself to consider a different paradigm. If you want to live in a world where people let you live the way you want to live without using violence to make you do what they want, then share this video with your friends, post it on Facebook, post it on Twitter. If you want to change society, you have to change the way a society thinks about things. Changing the structures without changing the thinking accomplishes nothing. If you want more content like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel, Storm Clouds Gathering on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/StormCloudsGathering and Twitter at Collapse Updates. And you can keep up with everything we're doing on StormCloudsGathering.com. Also remember, Wednesday nights, which is tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern, we have our roundtable discussion. It's uncensored. You can call in and bring up any topic you want.